From the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Wednesday in January. John, I've been putting off this podcast for far too long because I am once again sick, but I'm recovering, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sitting here in this chair across from you saying that I get happy when you get sick. But that's the first part of this sentence. Is I am glad when you get sick, and I am not responsible for it. As somebody who lives in a booger factory and is just constantly like coughed on and slobbered on and all that stuff. Like it makes me. I spent last winter constantly worried that the illnesses that my children carry and give to me because they love me, we're going to transfer to you. But when you get sick, independent of me, that is just like a small weight off my shoulders.
I fear for when I am surrounded by booger monsters because, as you can tell, my immune system is poor.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it would get better, but I feel like you've had a lot of practice and it's probably that cake's probably baked right now.
Yes, exactly. However, I am powering through to talk about what everybody in Baltimore is talking about this morning. Everybody on Sports Talk Radio, I'm sure, is talking about this morning. And that's the fact that the Orioles claimed Jhonkensy Noel. Not any other coaching decisions that happened with any other Baltimore sports teams. We're going to talk about Jhonkensy Noel coming to the Orioles 40-man roster. We're going to talk about some utility men who are still out there and whether they could interest the Orioles in free agency. But first, got to get to a 5-star review that somebody gave us on Apple Podcasts. This is from My Initials Are AWL, who writes, Paul Mancano is a real pro's pro, even going back to his days at Masson. John Meoli is the reporter extraordinaire. Together, this captures the Orioles magic you want out of a podcast. As far as starting pitchers go, they should trade for Ohtani. Not a bad idea.
Heard of him.
Heard of that guy.
Heard of him. Do you think they would have to put Dylan Beavers in the deal?
You know, that's a deal breaker for me. If Beavers is involved, I want to get the Beavers dam out in left field this year. So I'm not doing that.
Did we talk about at the winter meetings that they could do like a safari theme thing?
Yes.
Yeah. Even before they signed the polar bear.
Yeah, they have polar bear, beavers, obviously Cowser.
Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah.
There's probably more.
There are. By the way, write us a 5-star review and I'll read it out here on the show. I mean, Christmas is over, but it's still Noel for the Orioles.
Hell yeah.
I need to workshop that. The Orioles claimed Big Christmas a few days ago. You may remember him from hitting a home run off Grayson Rodriguez in his MLB debut, coming over from the Cleveland Guardians. Had a good 2024 season, not so good 2025 season, but still just 24 years old. Outfielder. He's got his connection to Craig Albernez, coming over from Cleveland. 2024 hit 13 homers in just 67 games, had a 113 OPS plus. Became a little bit of a lefty masher as well during that time frame. And then 2025 did not go as well. Hit just 162, 6 homers, negative 1.4 baseball reference WAR. Defense, not great. Big swing and miss. Big chaser. But worth a waiver claim, considering, the Orioles didn't have to do much in order to get him. So why not?
Yeah. There was a time, and it's not necessarily this time anymore, when you'd see somebody get DFA'd and you're like, but the Orioles are going to claim that guy. It used to be just any pitcher who was breathing and hadn't been here before.
And even the ones that had been here before.
Even some that had been here before would come back. And when I saw this, whenever it happened a couple weeks ago, I thought it was an interesting fit. You remember a couple off seasons ago, Ryan O'Hearn was the winner, but they spent a lot of time in pursuit of cheap power, because if you bring in 5 guys who hit the ball really hard or do something really well and do other things not as well that make it so that they're not really like consistent big leaguers, you can do that.
Lewin Diaz got claimed and DFA'd 18 times.
Lewin Diaz,
Franchi Cordero,
Josh Lester. There was another one who wasn't Josh Lester, who was Josh Lester like substance, and that was like kind of where they were at. And I think this is a good pursuit. I would venture to say that if we see Jhonkensy Noel in spring training, he will be there as a non-rest or invitee, because they're going to try to slip him through waivers, and you can get to do what you want to do with them, and you see what happens. But to the point that I think we were making a couple episodes ago, there's not a ton of like major league caliber depth in Norfolk right now. And this is still a young player and who can kind of be part of that cohort of like guys who can help if you need them to.
Yeah. I mean, he is being claimed to slip through waivers, as you said, John.
Yeah.
I mean, he is not going to, in all likelihood, unless calamity hits, and we've seen calamity hit this roster before, in all likelihood, not going to make this opening day roster, and very well could not be on this 40-man roster in a week's time. If they like somebody else, if they sign somebody else and they have to clear room on the 40-man roster, they might have to DFA him, and he could get claimed by another team.
Yeah.
Also out of options, so that kind of makes things a little bit more difficult. So there is some risk here, but also not really any, because you're not doing much in order to clear space for him. And if you get him through waivers, and if he is in your organization, and you need to call up a guy because Tyler O'Neill is hurt again. And you traded
again.
Dylan Beavers.
Not again.
You can call him up in May, and maybe he can platoon against some lefties for you.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about some guys who are still out there in free agency. The Orioles are still connected to the big two starting pitchers who are still out there. Ranger Suarez, Framber Valdez. Our own Andy Kuska reporting that the Orioles are still looking at rotation options. They still could use somebody even after trading for Shane Baz. Those two guys have yet to sign. One guy who did sign, Tatsuya Imai, before his posting window ended, he signed a 3-year deal worth $54 million guaranteed and an opt-out after each of his first 2 years with the Houston Astros. John, is that a miss that the Orioles did not sign Tatsuya Imai?
I don't think. Maybe it seems like that is not for what he was pitched as. I don't think he was ever considered like Yamamoto, Roki Sasaki type talent, but that feels a little light in terms of the contract to me. And that also kind of tells you where what the market was on him. He's not the biggest guy. I think there's some pitch shape stuff that.
Yeah, he's under 6 foot. He's like 5'9", I think.
Yeah, I think there's some pitch shape things that teams had a little bit of pause on. Not that it wasn't good. It's just not really quantifiable in the way that, like, if you're part of the Orioles pitching group and you're sitting in front of your computer in January and you're looking at like pitch shapes and movement profiles, it's not something that like has a bright green box around it like you'd want. It's a little different. And I think for the, especially for where the Orioles are now, when you put in what their offseason has been and what they've done on the pitching side, it feels like there's space for anything. We've had that conversation, and you can go in any different direction, but you want it to be more of a knowable thing, whatever it is. And that's been the theme of their offseason. I was talking to someone yesterday about the Taylor Ward, Grayson Rodriguez trade still, and like, it's knowable. That is, all those components are knowable. And this would be adding a wild card into a mix where they're not really interested in that.
Right. A couple other righties who are still out there, Zach Gallen, Chris Bassett. They could still trade for somebody if they would like to, but we're sitting here. We've got about 5 weeks until spring training. A lot can happen between now and then. We're over the halfway point in the offseason. And as the Orioles showed with the Pete Alonso deal, they are willing to dip deeper into their pocketbooks than they have been in previous offseasons. So I would still expect them, and John, I can't imagine you disagree, to make at least one more addition to this rotation.
Yeah, and it seems like the market is kind of going to come to them. Dylan Cease signed his 7-year deal. I'm trying to think back to, I think there were a handful of long-term deals last year, but two Scott Boras clients who are in like kind of prime age to get like long-term deals signed what are essentially bridge deals.
Yeah.
In my and Michael King. And I think the thought was that the Boras guys would sign and this whole train would get moving. But if there's a disconnect between how long these guys want and how long teams want to give them, then the Orioles can kind of pick their spots and not, this isn't like Dan Duquette, like the last pitcher available will be the one that I sign. But I think they can kind of pick their spots. And I think there's an opportunity for them to continue to fix things in the rotation. I think there's a world where the Orioles can do whatever they want. And I think if you sat them down right now, they want to add.
Yeah. And there are still some bats that are out there that haven't signed to that could get the market moving. Bregman, Tucker, Bellinger, those guys still have yet to sign. So as you pointed out earlier in the offseason, Scott Boras often likes to put one guy on the market and say, all right, let's get a deal done.
Yeah.
Get a deal done. All right, who's next? And run through it that way.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And you would assume that, Framber Valdez and Ranger Suarez will sign within like minutes of each other.
Right.
That's kind of how I think that will happen. Or
one is going to set the market for the other guy.
Yes. And I think they're probably in a little bit of a staring contest with each other to be like, are you gonna budge? Are you gonna budge? And
yeah, I think that's Tucker and Bellinger in a way too.
Yeah.
Like,
and it makes this is I don't want to say this. I don't even want to. I started talking, but like it makes the way that the Orioles have handled this offseason like feel smart. It looks smart because they are not beholden to everything, to these market dynamics they have no control over. There are probably 20 other cities. That means probably like a dozen teams that aren't trying or claiming to try, and they're signing, guys because the league's making them spend money before they go into a lockout. There are probably 15 cities right now where the discourse is what's going on. Like,
right,
this team needs to do X, Y, and Z still, and it's January. Football season's over. Like, what's the holdup here? That's not what's happening here, and I think that is incredibly valuable.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some position players that are out there in free agency. Not the sexiest conversation because we're talking about utility guys. We're not really talking about guys who are being signed as starters. The Orioles have their starters in place in the infield, in the outfield, at catcher. When I look at the roster right now, assuming that the Orioles are going to have 13 position players on their opening day roster, I'm looking at 9 locks. Those 9 locks being Adley Rutschman, Samuel Basallo, Pete Alonso, Jackson Holliday, that's 4. Gunnar Henderson, I think he's going to make it. Jordan Westberg, Tyler O'Neill, if he's healthy, Colton Cowser, and Taylor Ward. So that's 9 guys that the Orioles have that, assuming they are healthy, will make the opening day roster. 3 guys I have on the bubble: Dylan Beavers, Leody Taveras, Jeremiah Jackson. And then 2 guys who are on the roster right now, who, if they broke camp, would have to make the team tomorrow, but are pretty duplicative with what they have on the roster currently, and that's Ryan Mountcastle, Coby Mayo. I am still of the position, John, that the Orioles don't need 3 right-handed hitting first basemen, and I don't think they even need 2 right-handed hitting first basemen. So I tend to think one or both of Coby Mayo or Ryan Mountcastle will be dealt before opening day, and perhaps before the start of spring training.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that could happen. I also think, and this is going to go into like the mentioning all the former players you don't want to mention, but the Orioles were so proud of themselves the year that they just had Colton Cowser, even though their outfield was settled when they needed Colton Cowser, and Colton Cowser ended up having a month that like put him into the Rookie of the Year conversation, even though the rest of the season didn't go as well as that April did. They were so happy with themselves for just having those guys and having that depth in that option. And honestly, it doesn't really, I don't think that, I think that problem that you're talking about only happens if they need to do other things. And I guess that's part of the broader conversation that we're going to have, is that like, how does the rest of this bench look? And more to the point, what do you want this bench to be? And I think that is, I think there are probably different schools of thought on this. And I have certainly shared some opinions on that, and I don't know why I'm teasing this. We're just going to talk about it.
Give me your opinion. I mean, if you're constructing a bench, if you are Mike Elias / Craig Alvarez, and you are wanting to come up with the best possible bench that could maneuver itself to hit against righties, against lefties, that can move guys in and out of the infield, you have positional versatility. Are you worried about how many guys can play how many different positions? Are you worried about how many guys can platoon? What is your ideal kind of bench look like given this roster?
I am not worried about that. I am not worried about like positional versatility. If you are giving me control of the roster and control of the game, I want as many good hitters as you can possibly give me, because there's a much higher probability on a night-to-night basis that you are going to need a good hitter to come in a big spot than you are going to need someone who can play shortstop to come in and play shortstop for 4 innings. The Orioles don't need to worry about that because they have 3 infielders who can play shortstop, who are going to be playing every day.
Jackson Holliday, Jordan Westbrook, Gunnar Henderson.
Yes. That is not an issue. Just like you can cross that off the list. Like the traditional, the so-and-so needs a utility player who can play shortstop. That doesn't exist here. But the same way we had the conversation, the same way we had the conversation about like having a third catcher, that would be great. But you're playing defense against like a very small, like theoretical opponent that you're going to need a third catcher. The most you're going to need a third catcher for is 8 2/3 innings. Like you in the James McCann scenario, if he doesn't just play with a broken face, the Orioles would have been in trouble if Adley Rutschman came into the game and they had no catcher on the bench and something happened.
Right.
That's not to say that isn't possible. They had like 1 million catchers get hurt last year, but there were a lot more games. There are a lot more games when you could use a Ryan Mountcastle off the bench in the 7th inning against some lefty, and that is a game you can win. The game when something happens to Adley Rutschman and Samuel Basayo and they don't have a catcher, like that's not a game they're probably going to win.
Did they win the James McCann game? I think they did, right?
Did they win the James McCann?
The broken face game.
That was a crazy long day because that was a double header, and I think Jordan Westbrook got hurt.
Yes.
And
is that the game he broke his hand?
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. A lot of stuff happened that day.
Yeah. But I mean,
sorry, I'm just rambling.
So no, the only problem I have with that is if you do want to give a guy a day off, or if somebody is hurt. Oh yes, Jackson Holliday, Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westbrook can all play shortstop, but doesn't that create a domino effect where you put Holliday at shortstop and then you need a second baseman?
Yes.
Or you put Westbrook at shortstop and you need a third baseman, and then who plays those positions?
Yes. I mean, there needs to be a person who can do these things. I don't know that the internal view is that Jeremiah Jackson can do that, but if he is a below average defender and like a fringe average, slightly above average hitter, and he's getting 300 plate appearances, and you just, swallow hard and take the 2 days that you have to play him in the infield a week for the possibility of getting, a couple good pinch hit at bats a week. I think I would take that.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know what, because the alternative is somebody who, I'm doing it again. The alternative is somebody who has the perception of being an elite defender and an elite base runner and can't hit a lick.
I think I know who you're talking about.
I don't like that experience.
Jorge Mateo is still can't stop catching strays.
Sorry.
The only thing is Jeremiah Jackson played very well last year, hit the ball very well last year, but it was only 48 games.
Yeah.
And he played just 1 game at second base and 13 games at third base. The rest of the time was in the outfield. So I'm not sure I'm ready to trust him to be, not just to be a average to slightly below average defender at any infield position, but also I'm not sure that hitting is going to translate. I mean, this is a guy that was kind of stuck at AA until last year. So it's possible, and I'm sure the Orioles are rooting for that. I'm just not ready to bank on Jeremiah Jackson being your Swiss Army knife who's going to solve every problem for you if somebody goes down.
Yeah, no, and I don't think he is, but I think if the priority is to, and then we could talk about some of the players that could fill this role. I think the priority for me is always good players.
Yeah.
Like good players. So if, there's a world where you sign Leody Taveras for $2 million in the beginning of the offseason, you don't think about it. And now you don't have to worry about that role. But once you do that, you can't just do that again on the infield. It doesn't make a ton of sense because there's an opportunity cost to having that guy on the roster, which means a person who can impact the team in different ways wouldn't be. And that is where I kind of struggle. If you're, and I think we don't really know this about Craig Albernaz. And I'm not sure I think we kind of knew it about Brandon Hyde, but like to go back to like Buck Schultz, like he wanted specific roles. That's why Ryan Flaherty was just here for like a decade, is he wanted somebody who could do what Ryan Flaherty did on the team, even though he didn't really play that much. I think we're going to find out whether Craig Albernaz is really locked in on having, positional versatility and flexibility and the ability to do stuff, or and I think he truly could. I think he could prioritize. I think Cleveland pinch hit a lot. I think they platooned a lot. I don't think anybody who's listening to this particularly wants to hear that, but it works. When it works, it's great. I mean, nobody cared that the Orioles pinch hit Brian Mountcastle and Ryan O'Hearn for each other in the 6th inning of every single game in 2023 because it worked.
Right.
Like nobody cared because it worked.
Exactly.
And I think there's going to be a lot of value in having options to do that. Maybe more so than having guys who can stand at a position for a day if you need them to.
That's fair. That's why I don't think you're going to necessarily like some free agent options that I'm going to throw at you, John.
Let's see it.
I've got 4 guys on this list. Several of them have been below average hitters for a while now. Let's start with Willie Castro, 29 years old, switch hitter, can play the infield and the outfield, 2024 All-Star. Last year with Minnesota and Chicago, as in the Cubs, had a .226 batting average, negative .1 WAR, 11 homers, 89 OPS plus in 120 games. He is a theoretical threat on the base paths, even though he has just one season with more than 14 stolen bases. How do you feel about somebody who is a switch hitter, can play the infield and the outfield, and is a recent All-Star?
Fine.
Not doing anything for you?
He seems fine. I think if you're going to get someone who can do all those things, then get somebody who could do all those things in one person. You know, that is kind of the ideal. If somebody's a switch hitter and you don't need to, because the Orioles are going to have a little bit of trouble, I think, getting all the right-handed hitters they want into the lineup when they face a lefty. If you have somebody if you have a left-handed hitting utility infielder, you're just going to end up in a weird spot because you're going to want that. Like, you're not going to want Jackson Holiday to sit against a righty. You're not going to want Gunnar Henderson's not going to sit, period. So I guess somebody who can be a little flexible and do any of the things you need is the answer, because that's just one roster spot. You could put anybody, then you maybe don't need Leody Taveras as much. Right. But they've signed him, so they probably think they do. I think my vote would be for somebody like this, who is a switch hitter who can play all over, and that would be kind of the way that happened. But I'm not positive on his the center field aspect of it, but I think that would kind of be important here too.
So Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, to bring back an old name that Orioles fans I'm sure are familiar with from his days with the Yankees. He has played in center field in his past.
Yeah.
41 games in center field in 2023, but hasn't played a whole lot there since. He is a former Gold Glove caliber third baseman. Hitting .262 for his career in 8 seasons. Doesn't walk a whole lot, doesn't hit a whole lot of homers, but brings solid defense. And he didn't really help himself with the Blue Jays this past year after he got traded there. Hit 162 in 15 postseason games. But Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, at 31 years old, not a bad utility man, right?
Not bad.
You don't hate it?
This is not like, this isn't, I understand the value of all this, and it's just not for me, He
hit just 2 home runs in 138 games last year.
Yeah. And
that's not doing it for you.
I think there's a world where somebody like him also is in a little bit of, you can dine out on a reputation. And I honestly have no idea. You're obviously hearing me thinking about these players for the first time in real time. But the idea of them, it just doesn't get the juices going.
That's fair. Can I interest you in one, Dylan Moore, who is going to be 33 years old this season? Split time last year between Seattle and Texas, a .206 career hitter with just 63 home runs in 7 seasons, but has played every single defensive position in his career except for catcher. That's kind of ridiculous versatility, and that's something that perhaps would be a nice safety net. What do you think? Right-handed bat?
Yeah, I think the right-handed part will make it a little will make it a little tricky. I think as you know, you're just throwing these names to me. I'm looking at Baseball Savant and I'm trying to find.
You're going to see a lot of blue for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, but yes, and is what I should say. Yes, and they have to do things that the Orioles want. Like Dylan Moore in 2024 had really good, like he really controlled strike zone well. He didn't hit the ball super hard. He didn't impact the ball a lot, but he controlled the strike zone. That's valuable. I think there's you're going to want good at bats from these people too. I think that's kind of the baseline for me. And again, is this somebody who's going to help the Orioles turn a game in like the last third of the game? I think there's so much more upside than that, like to that criteria for this role, than just having been able to play a lot of different positions. And I know I'm just like dumping on the point of this, but none of these guys really get it going for me.
Okay, how about somebody who has less positional versatility, but is a better career hitter, has a connection to the Orioles, as in is one of just 2 teams he's ever played for in his big league career? Ramon Urias. Should the Orioles bring him back? They traded him to the Houston Astros at the deadline. He went on to hit 223 with just 3 homers in 35 games for them down the stretch with a 76 OPS plus. He was not what the Astros thought they were getting. They non-tendered him at the start of the offseason, and now he is back on the free agent market. He's going to be 32 next season. We know that he won a Gold Glove here. We know that he can man third base. He has come up big at some critical times, kind of one of the more underrated Orioles, I think, of the last several years, in my opinion. I'm not sure how much he has left in the tank. I'm not sure the Orioles have room for somebody who is pretty much at this point relegated to third base, maybe second base.
Yeah. Yes.
You want to bring him back? I saw a comment on YouTube, by the way. We're live on YouTube, X, and Facebook every time. And DPLANG911 says, how about Ramon Urias reunion?
Yeah, I mean, that is basically what I'm talking about. Like, for all of his, like, there were times when Ramon Urias was not really like a contributor on the Baltimore Orioles. I think that's pretty fair to say, right? There were also times when he like single-handedly carried their offense. Like, he was good a lot. He was good a really, really lot.
16 homers in 2022. His power dipped tremendously in 2023 as he dealt with some injuries, and then back up to 11 homers in 2024, and then was off to an okay start. Not great in 2025 before they dealt him away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it now, and this is not the best way to, parse this out, but like calendar months from like the start of 2023 on, there were 18 of them, 17, basically there were 18 of them. 2 of them he played for Houston, and most of them he played for the Orioles. He was an above average hitter in 8 of those.
Yeah, that's
fine.
That's
when
okay.
He wasn't. Yeah, most other, like, there were only 4 really bad months, including September in Houston. The rest are like in the 80s, and like, I think that is the type of profile that I want. I mean, I'm thinking about like, and we're talking about like, he's more of a bench bat than a utility infielder,
sure,
but he can play the infield, and like, I'm thinking of like, I don't think by the end of his career he was getting used at third base, but like Justin Turner type, like who's just there to like, who will get some knocks for you and will be around to like to help you win games. And right. I think there's, we're talking about a position that is literally defensive, like in the utility infielder, and that is like, you're not talking about a utility hitter. You're talking about a utility infielder. You're talking about somebody who can do a job defensively and do several jobs defensively and help your team. But that's like an actual defensive concept. Like, right. not in the sense of like hitting and fielding. Like, it's defensive in that you're trying not to lose because you don't want to lose a game because you don't have that person. And I understand why. And this is why I'm sitting here, and I'm not like, I've never tried to run a baseball team. I assume no one would let me, but if they did, thank you, Paul. If they did, that would be something that I would need to be talked out of. And there's probably like 30 managers that would tell me I'm an idiot because I don't know what I'm talking about. And that's fine. But there's also, they also like to do stuff during games and help the team get hits.
Yeah. I mean, this is why the Pete Alonso signing, as for as much as we like about the deal, does make things a little bit difficult, because Ryan Mountcastle would be kind of an ideal bench bat. I mean, sure, he has a lot of swing and miss, and he hasn't had as much power over the last several years, but he kind of fits what you're talking about, John.
Yes.
And Coby Mayo, in a similar way, as somebody who can just bring microwave offense, just bring him in off the bench, and he face a lefty as a pinch hitter, and he's probably going to get the job done. I mean, but because Pete Alonso is here, and those guys can really only play first base at this point, even though Mike Elias has said Coby Mayo maybe could be used in a corner outfield. We just haven't seen it at all.
Yeah.
It just makes them duplicative. And it also goes back to your point about the AAA depth. I mean, they just don't have a Joey Ortiz, a Connor Norby, somebody who is ready to be called up and help this team in the infield.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning those guys. I was going to say that this is a job that you should be able to fill internally.
Right.
I can't remember for the life of me who it was, but I remember when I was doing my own newsletter, as opposed to writing for the Baltimore Banner, you can subscribe for $1 for 6 months.
Hell yeah.
The Orioles, were at the end of claiming every single infielder who came on waivers because they had no infielders. They had Gunnar Henderson and they had Jordan Westberg coming through the pipeline, but they still needed to have literal bodies on the infield. And I remember, I wish I could remember who it was, but basically when this ends, it will mean the Orioles are functional as a team, an organization, because they'll have their own infielders. They've traded those two players you mentioned, Connor Norby, Joey Ortiz. They traded Cesar Prieto, who's not a world beater, but could do this job that we're talking about
Certainly
right now.
Could.
He could do this job for $770,000, and you would just not have to think about it. He would not necessarily be making an offensive impact, but you can do it.
Yeah. Max Wagner never turned into anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, and there's some attrition, and this job specifically too, without painting too broad of a brush, is that in 10 years, not 10 years, in a couple years, the Orioles will be able to fill these do it all utility infielder bench guy roles from their Latin American program,
right?
But the players who would be doing that for the 2026 Baltimore Orioles, would have been signed in 2018, 2019, and 2020, and the Orioles were just scaling this operation that they have now that's really effective operating right now, but was not really in existence then. So this is all a problem that, I think if they hadn't made some of the trades they did, and I don't think they regret any of the trades they made, but that's how they would solve this. And this is a problem that you solve internally, and it makes you don't have to hold your nose for somebody who is not necessarily an impact player and pay him real money and have him on the roster locked in there, because you're talking about somebody who's in their 30s and is a big leaguer. You could have somebody who's a little more fungible, and you can bring them up and bring them down and do what the roster needs. And I think that is a consequence of how the last couple of years have gone with the trades and some of the things that necessarily haven't worked out.
And even the guys that they brought in at the trade deadline, most of them, of the 16 guys that they brought in, most of them were pitchers. And some of the infielders, some of the position players that they got are pretty far away from the big leagues. I mean, Wilfred De La Cruz, the guy they got from in the Andrew Kittredge deal, is pretty far away. I mean,
he seemed really interesting when I was doing the rankings. I was reading, I mean, literally, we're going to do this next week or whenever it happens. You read these scouting reports, these 16-year-olds, 5-tool player, controls the strike zone, elite bat speed. And it's wow, that guy sounds awesome. And then you never hear about him again. Right. But I was, as I was doing this and reading all the stuff and writing a report, I was yeah, this sounds like a pretty good player.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he's 17 and who knows, but and I think also in that trade, there was, Brandon Butterworth, who are in those trades, who I think is pretty. I think there's like a world where there's a world where he like becomes an interesting guy. Not to say that he's not one now, but my understanding is that he kind of like had a little bit of a light switch moment after the trade and was like, oh, I can walk, and if I only swing at pitches I could hit hard, then I will hit the ball hard, and that is quite an interesting revelation for a player to have. I'm sure it's like there's two parts of your life: the part before you realize that and the part after you realize that, and like he's in the latter now. So these are all roles that even like in a couple years they could fill internally, but right now they can't, and that's kind of challenging.
Somebody threw out Terran Vavra, who elected free agency at the end of this past season. How do you feel?
Terran Vavra, who's probably had more like Orioles returns than like Steve Pearce, which makes him have like the most Orioles returns of all time at this point.
For some reason in my mind, he had re-signed with the team. I don't think he did. I think he is still a free agent.
I believe there was some interest in him from other teams, but
we'll see.
But also, like, I think he could. Maybe he can coach if he wants to coach. He can play if he wants to play. Like, he's just one of those kind of guys.
Yeah. Somebody who's steeped in the Orioles organization. John, you mentioned J15, which is coming up. Used to be J2. Now it is J15. That's the start of the international signing period.
Yes,
and that is in 8 days. So we're going to hear a bunch of names that we will hear and learn a lot about and then forget about for several years. And then when they reach the upper levels of the minor leagues, a lot of Orioles fans will be like, oh, yeah, well, that guy. Sam Obasai was one of those guys.
Yeah. When I start writing it, I'm going to have an interesting column about the process of the international side.
Yeah.
When I start writing it, that sounds vague. It's just I haven't written it in a while.
No, it's
okay.
It's an interesting side of things. And of course, the Orioles have bolstered a lot of their resources and a lot of their presence in the international market. All right. That just about does it for our show here today. At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at Old Banner Sports. You can subscribe to the Baltimore Banner and get John's newsletter, Inside the Dugout, where he has so much great coverage for you. Andy Kuska as well, doing great things. So is Kyle Kuhn. John, I think it's finally time that I start to watch Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
We're in the official dead period. I'm sick. I have no reason not to watch a Fast and Furious movie.
Yeah. I think this might be the time. I was actually thinking about that.
There we go. All right. Well, I'll come back to you with my review. And of course, write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and I'll read it out here on the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. For John Meoli, I'm Paul Mancano.